topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Well, hello and welcome. Bill Martinez here. Good to have you with us. We're going to talk about this very pernicious drug that is out in the marketplace that is killing a generation of young people in our country. I've seen it as an act of war. You may have heard me talk about it with other guests, but like never before, especially when you look at the numbers and what's been going on in the last decade, how many we've lost. I've heard numbers anywhere between 80, 100,000 a year. I mean, think about it. That's more than we've lost in Vietnam in 7, 8 years of Vietnam, 10 years of Vietnam, 66,000 Americans died in Vietnam. And here we've got young people that are dying, from overdose of fentanyl. Fentanyl has been introduced into other drugs, and these kids think they're taking maybe a Tylenol or something. And I'm talking about kids that are in college, maybe working late night on a term paper or studying for exams, and they need something to keep them up. And a friend says, "Hey, look, I've got this. This will help you out." And little do they know that it's laced with fentanyl. It's even to the point where now we understand that that marijuana, that the kids smoke quite liberally these days, that is even being laced with fentanyl. This is how pervasive that it is. And of course, it's very well accepted that it originates out of China, and from China it goes to Mexico. Mexico formulates the fentanyl in pills. And in some cases, the pills are made to look like almost like candy, anything that they can do to entice people and make it seem like it's, not so dangerous. But the kind of collection that the FDA and our law enforcement officials are picking up, they're in such large numbers that they could eradicate our entire country, if not even cities, at one fell swoop. I mean, it's just unbelievable. But there's been this kind of casual, laissez-faire attitude about fentanyl, and we're going to have Dr. Robert Marbut going to be joining us in just a moment, and looking forward to having him on the show. He is the producer, filmmaker of the documentary Fentanyl: Death Incorporated. It's the most comprehensive documentary ever produced on the fentanyl crisis. Death Incorporated will provide an in-depth exploration of the most dangerous drug created of all time. Think about it. And as I was mentioning to you, I mean, this originates out of China and then goes to Mexico. They formulate the drug, and then it's sold here. And of course, completing the kind of the trinity of this whole process are the consumers here in America. Some cases, you can say long-term drug addicts, but in many cases, we've got innocent children, in a sense, that have died accidentally. And you've heard these stories, and it's amazing to me why there isn't a greater outrage happening, around the country over this. Parents are coming out in mass numbers and, up in arms about this, but still it's underreported. It's almost like our media is complicit in this massive extinction of young people. And think about it. I mean, this is, in many cases, the people that are dying here are young people. It's our future of our country. 18 to 35-year-olds, and like I said, in many cases, unsuspectingly taking the drug and then dying. And it's just excruciatingly painful, as you can possibly imagine. I want to play right now a trailer, from this documentary as we await our guest, Dr. Robert Marbut, who is going to be joining us hopefully any minute now. So let's go ahead and run this trailer.
This is fentanyl. This is your brain on fentanyl. This is your friend's brain who is doing fentanyl with you. This is the guy down the street also doing fentanyl. These are your kids who thought they were taking a Percocet they got from a friend who got it off the internet, but the pill was laced with fentanyl. Now they're unconscious and unresponsive. This is the Mexican cartels. This is the Mexican cartels working with Chinese chemical companies to make pills by the millions, destabilizing the border to traffic enough fentanyl to kill the entire population of a country many times over. This is the ports of British Columbia, where chemicals to make fentanyl are smuggled in by the tonnage, and Canadian super labs are producing fentanyl to export to countries around the world. These are gangs and drug dealers near you, haphazardly mixing fentanyl powder with other chemicals like xylazine, which is a horse tranquilizer, causing the user's skin to fall off. But hey, at least the high lasts longer. Any questions?
I have a question. What is a super lab?
I want to know, why are we seeing these record overdose deaths just in America?
Why is this happening here? Our local hospital rooms are blowing up. Why?
Because they're killing our children. And how do we change that?
Off in the fence, broad daylight.
How much of this deadly poison is coming across the border?
How come all these people are all passed out?
Where is all of this stuff coming from?
Is China purposely addicting our nation?
How can parents protect their children from fentanyl? That's a tough question.
Yeah, if that doesn't capture your heart and bruise your brain, I don't know what. And this is just the trailer, okay? And Dr. Marbut is encountering some technical difficulties right now and joining us, but hopefully he will be on here in just a moment so that he can give you more of the background of what went into producing this and the motivation. I mean, you can only imagine the motivation was, without a doubt, I would think, the sympathy that he had to have had with, with the parents and the victims of Death Incorporated, of fentanyl, and the people that are responsible. This is the thing that it's just unbelievable. What is taking place here with with the situation with fentanyl. Trying to get a message to Dr. Marbut right now so that we can get him another invitation. Somehow he's having some difficulty in connecting with us, so I'm going to send a message to the studio, to our producer, to this is what you're seeing me do here right now, ladies and gentlemen. This is, as you know, this is live. So, but you can put up with us here for just a moment as we try to get him connected with so you can get connected with the show here, so that you can hear him, firsthand for yourself, because he has so much insight into this. And when I had spoken with him before, this movie, this documentary, Fentanyl, Death Incorporated, for those people in the country who have seen this movie, it's really, as you can see from the trailer, it's quite captivating and it's powerful. And this film, as I mentioned, delves into the multifaceted aspects of this dangerous drug, featuring insights from leading experts in the international and domestic supply chains, law enforcement, medicine, harm reduction, and more. It is by far the most comprehensive documentary on this topic, on the fentanyl crisis, I think, that's out there. It's certainly the most comprehensive I've ever experienced. And as I said, this is going to give you an in-depth exploration of this most dangerous drug that is created of all time. And it's amazing, that here we are, and then we're coming off of everything that we just came off of with COVID, and understanding more about gain of function and all these dangerous chemicals that are out there. But meanwhile, I guess the thing that astounds me is that fentanyl has been around, so long, has been out there, and it keeps killing, like I said, 80 to 100,000 young people every year. And I looked at it when I spoke with Dr. Marbut before. I looked at it as kind of an act of war against our country. And I know that that sounds pretty wild when you think about you think about an act of war with another nuclear power like China, but we keep kind of playing patty cake with them. We're worried about some of the trade deficiencies that are going on. Well, we got bigger fish to fry here. I mean, when they are involved, single-handedly, we already know, and I know this is disturbing, but I think it's pretty well accepted that China was the starting link in COVID, that all the information has come out, has indicated that it wasn't as innocent as they would want us to believe, whether it was the WHO, social media platforms, and others, thinking that COVID was just, something that just happened out of the atmosphere somehow, and it was, something that came from a bird or whatever. But I think it's very well accepted now, according to the latest reports, that this came out of a laboratory in Wuhan, not the wet markets of China. And so that's been covered up. And here in America alone, we lost over 1 million people, if you want to believe the numbers and associate them all with COVID, the death of people who died of COVID, over 1 million people. And I don't know, it's just amazing to me that our country just kind of just shrugged our shoulders about it and just took it all in stride like it didn't matter. But wait a minute, our parents, grandparents, relatives died. And as you heard me report before, they died alone in the hospital and without family, anybody there to say goodbye. And all that happened there out of China, and the way I believe that this country was attacked, you can say, we don't know for sure if it was intentional. Most people, I guess, in order to avoid the obvious, are quick to say, well, it was maybe some sort of lab mistake or, some unfortunate occurrence. Well, regardless of what it was, it happened, and people should be held responsible. China should be held responsible, but they're not being held responsible. And they're not being held responsible for what they're doing with fentanyl. Now, I believe the Trump administration this time around is putting some pressure, and I think that's one of the bargaining points of this whole situation with the trade deal that they're trying to work out. And they've gotten some cooperation out of Mexico, where they're trying to take some responsibility and close down some of these factories that are manufacturing, these pills. But this is just incredibly disturbing, and the reality of what's going on. And Dr. Robert Marbut and his team, as I mentioned to you, he is the producer. He's a filmmaker, and they have produced this powerful documentary, Fentanyl, Death Incorporated. And I believe that Dr. Marbut is connected with us now. Thank you for your patience. And it looks like it's only going to be on audio only. But even in audio only, it is a privilege to have Dr. Marbut with us now. Dr. Marbut, welcome to the show. Good to have you with us. Dr. Marbut, can you hear me now? Like the commercial says?
He is here, and let me get him back on.
Okay. All right. I
Hello,
know we're just
Doctor.
getting.
I'm trying it this is my fourth try. Are you hearing me?
I can hear you.
There you
Yeah,
go.
I can hear you. Okay. I guess we're gonna have to do it without a camera, so that's fine. I will make the most of this situation. I've been, uh, leading up and explaining to our audience the documentary. We played the trailer for the documentary, and so we'd counted a privilege and honor to have you explain to our audience why the documentary. Why were you motivated to do this?
Well, about 4 years ago, when I was still working at the White House, I was up on the Hill talking to a senator who I consider a real friend and don't want to mention his name to
Mhm.
embarrass him. He's a good friend. He was on the type of committees you would expect that would understood the fentanyl crisis.
Mhm.
And what I realized was the senator said, well, after all, fentanyl is just meth, just stronger. And that couldn't be more wrong and incorrect. Fentanyl actually puts your chest cavity to sleep. It paralyzes your heart, it paralyzes your lungs.
Right.
Whereas meth is an extreme upper. It's like somebody on speed, and so my concern was when a senator who I had done many briefing papers for, who's a friend, doesn't understand what this is about and how we got here, and
Mhm.
they should. That was what the impetus for me to get a documentary going. And then as we got it going, we just came across more and more information about how bad it was, how we got here, and how
Right.
lethal the situation was.
Uh-huh. When was this?
And that would have been about 3.5 years ago because I carried into the
Wow.
Biden administration a little bit.
Uh-huh.
And when I immediately left, I said, we got to get a documentary because all the white papers I'm writing aren't working. And we need to do something more visual, more understandable, I guess.
Yeah.
And along the way, it became a much bigger project than we thought.
Yeah, but fentanyl had been around a lot longer than just 3 years ago. I mean, aren't we going on close to 10 years, if not over 10 years, Dr. Marbut, or I'm misunderstanding something?
No, that's exactly my point. Fentanyl came on the scene right when the Purdue Pharma was coming down. With after all the lawsuits, and
Mhm.
Purdue Pharma was no longer able to distribute their version of oxycodone, and hospitals stopped prescribing it, doctors stopped, the pharmacies stopped carrying it. And so you had all these, millions of prescriptions and hundreds of thousand people addicted, and that's where China and the Mexican cartels backfilled it, and they saw a business opportunity. And so this has been around a long time, and at that point, I really thought a friendly senator, especially who were reading briefing papers, would know all about it, and they didn't. And if they don't know that was my point. If a senator on the right committee doesn't know, we got major problems going here.
Well, especially because at this point, uh, oxycodone had been off the market, fentanyl in the market, probably at that point, uh, somewhere 8 to 10 years already.
Exactly.
And so 8 to 10,
Exactly.
8 to 10 years, and you've got data pointing to all this danger and young people dying. And he thinks it's just a minor drug out there that's maybe not as consequential as it should be.
And I think a lot of people really thought this is just, we had gone through PCP, we had gone through crack and cocaine, we'd gone through black tar, angel dust. We
Mm.
were just finishing up on meth. And I think a lot of people thought just this is our next one, but nobody understood how lethal fentanyl was compared to any of those other drugs. I mean, it's 100 times more powerful than morphine. Yeah,
Yeah.
and some super versions are S-fentanyl or sufentanil. Some of those are actually even more powerful than that. and literally 2 to 3 grains of a salt equivalent of fentanyl will kill you or I, and
Yeah.
or one rice grain will kill 15 people. And I don't think anybody understood how lethal fentanyl was. And I think that was sort of, there were many mistakes made along the way. In the prior administration that I was very frustrated with is they were sort of slow to react to all crisis, but they could not seem to talk about fentanyl because that it meant you had to talk about borders, and that was an inconvenient truth. To be able to, how do you say
Right.
we're worried about the fentanyl supply, but we're not really worried about our borders?
Well, and that's what I was explaining to the audience is that the chain, which began in China, they're producing, the raw ingredients. They're shipping it to Mexico. Mexico is formulating it, and then it's coming into a ready-made market. As you say, they were backfilling the orders. I mean, they had a market that was ripe and addicted to oxycodone, and they needed to have an answer to their pain.
And it was interesting, to when you break it down. I don't like to dwell too much about how we got here, but you do need to know a little bit so you understand how to get out, but we
Yes.
got to think about solutions. But in the beginning, the illicit fentanyl, illegal fentanyl, which, by the way, is not very pure, not very scientifically made. It's made in jungles and back alleys and basements. We're backfilling the white collar addicted folks who many had shoulder surgery, knee joint replacement. That was where it came from, and it was overprescribed and misprescribed. And so that was a group that people politically didn't really want to talk about. And then it was also simultaneously hitting the homelessness streets, especially on the West Coast and the Northeast. And that's a group that a lot of people just overlook. They say, oh, they're just druggies. We don't need to worry about them. And that's where it eventually started. But by about 2021, 2022, it was east to west, north to south, big city, small city, rural, urban. It's everywhere now. And we need to understand it because the numbers really aren't going down.
No, yeah, exactly. So, what are we talking? Over 1 million people have died of fentanyl overdoses since it came into the country?
Yeah, we're pretty close to it. We may not be right at that, but if not, we'll be at it this year. And remember, there's fentanyl kills you in a lot of different ways. And so not everybody measures all four, but there's the recreational drug use, which is what the media does talk about, unfortunately, because it's way more than that. And it's the number one killer of 18 to 45-year-olds in America, full stop, over everything else. But what a lot of people are not aware, it's the fastest growing killer for children 0 to 4. And they're obviously not drug addicts. They're just getting poisoned by fentanyl dust being out in public or a park bench or the street. And our documentary talks a lot about it. But now you got 2 other types of fentanyl overdoses starting to happen. Like in Philadelphia was the epicenter of Trank, which was a purposely laced fentanyl with horse tranquilizer. They were trying to reduce the death rate is what they were trying to do, but still keep the power of the high. And so that's lacing. And so often that's reported under horse tranquilizer death, not fentanyl. And then there's the people where they don't know that the fentanyl is in the supply, like weed, coke, crack, meth. You're starting to see fentanyl really poison the other illicit drug supplies and I by no means am saying you should be taking those other type of drugs because they're fatal too at a high dosage. But when you start adding fentanyl to it, it really is Russian roulette. And DEA is estimating about 2/3 of all other illicit drugs have some level of fentanyl in it now.
That's amazing. How insane is this that the suppliers are killing off their customers? This doesn't make sense.
Well, they're trying not to do that. They're trying to do their best to lower it. They're trying to do it to mix it, hence the lacing.
Mhm.
But the reality is, fentanyl is something so powerful that was built in the lab, designed in the lab, and nobody understood how powerful it was in the beginning. And I mean the people who were creating it. They don't want people to die. They want them to live so they can buy more and more and more.
Exactly. Right.
But the high of fentanyl is such a powerful, strong magnet that draws people to it. So they're trying to balance the high, the potency of the high, without making you die. And that's why they're really working hard now to lace it and dilute it now. But sadly, you still die. I have yet, I work on the street, as you and I've talked before,
Right.
all the time. I've been working on the street for 25 years, and I've never seen a drug where I have not met anybody who's been on it more than 18 months. Most of the people I know have only been on it 8, 9 months. And most doctors say the sort of half life of a user of fentanyl is somewhere around 12 to 14 months. You just die that fast. So
Right.
sometimes
Mhm.
it's a pure overdose. You took the wrong amount. And sometimes it's just the slow breakdown of all your systems. It paralyzes your lung, it paralyzes your heart, starts to affect your kidneys and liver, and then it starts affecting other body systems
Right.
that you slowly crash and then finally crater.
Does it work a little bit like heroin, to where your body builds up a certain resistance to where you've got to, uh, add more fentanyl to your dose?
Absolutely. All the opioids have that problem that if you start very carefully, to me, let me make it real clear. I don't think you can make fentanyl safe, and I don't think you can make the fentanyl supply chain safe. So
Mhm.
but from a user point of view, they say, all right, I'm going to start real light, dilute it down to a really low level, and then start. And what they find is two things happen. You build up that resistance, as you talk about, that almost all opioids and
Mhm.
many other drugs do the same thing. But it also brings you back to get more addicted and you crave the high more. So you start using more and you're using more often. And so you get this double whammy. And that's why I challenge somebody to tell me I was a regular fentanyl user 18 months ago and they're alive. You just can't
Mhm.
find somebody like that now. It's just so deadly.
Well, yeah, and you talk about the life expectancy of a user being somewhere between 14 and 18 months. I mean, I had never heard that before. I mean, this is
And that's on the high end because you get, a lot of people are familiar, one pill and dead or one pill
Mhm.
kills. There's several programs around the country who talk about that. There's a lot of people die on first use of fentanyl. You hear that all the time. And
Mhm.
so when I'm talking about 14 months, 16 months, 12 months, that doesn't even count the group of people who die instantly on first use.
Yeah,
That's just the outer edge of people who are really scientifically within their view of science trying to dilute it down.
yeah.
But the reality is, this is so powerful. You need white glove, vacuum laboratories to
Mhm.
measure this out to get to low levels. And you can't do that on the street. You can't do that in the jungle or in the basement in a back alley. You can't. We're trying to take the most powerful drug ever invented, and we're trying to treat this like weed on the street.
Right. Like as if you have some sort of exact formula. If it's done out of some, garage or backstreet operation type of deal, you have no idea how much of the fentanyl is actually in that pill, do you?
At all.
Yes.
It's a crapshoot. And we have a part in the movie. We have a DEA task force agent who is a deputy sheriff in San Diego, and he goes, the amount of instruments that you medically need to manage this to get the right dosing to live and not overdose is so minute. There's no measurable scales on the street or formulas to do this. And to think about, let's flip it and talk about that professional pharmaceutical grade fentanyl that's used for surgeries, in particular heart surgery. Without fentanyl, you probably couldn't have open heart surgery. It's a perfect medical drug medication for that because it lowers your heart rate and it reduces your breathing. So that's really an important drug to be used. But when you're in that circumstance, you were in a medical operating room and you got at least one medical MD anesthesiologist. You normally have a tech. You're hooked up on a device that's monitoring 7 or 8 vital signs. You have the overall operating doctor managing you, and you have a nurse. So you at least have 2 full-time people, 2 part-time people, and in a more advanced surgery, it's sometimes more than that, monitoring how you're doing fentanyl. And that's not how people take it on the street at all, and so even in that case, they're minutely managing it, and they're watching your oxygen, your blood take, your pulse, your blood pressure, several other things. And nobody's doing that on a street. And especially if you're taking fentanyl all alone at your house, nobody's going to know.
Exactly. Well, it brings the question of, are there accidental deaths in the operating room because of fentanyl?
There's always deaths around anesthesiologists. They always talk about it when you use, any sort of thing that puts you to sleep and do that. But it's nothing like it was, medical fentanyl was invented in 1959 by a guy named Dr. Jansen a long, long time ago. In the beginning, there were a lot more, on the table deaths, if you will. And they've gotten real good on how to monitor it. And so they know how to properly use it. So if you're being told you're going to have fentanyl for heart surgery, that will probably make heart surgery possible, because a lot of people would just die of shock on the table before fentanyl was used for open heart surgeries. And so fentanyl really, when properly used, and I mean medical fentanyl, but there's nothing remotely like medical fentanyl on the street. It's illicit fentanyl on the street. It's not medical fentanyl at all. And you're not getting the medical care when you're taking it.
Yeah, on top of that, to monitor it. I'll tell you, Dr. Marbut, now that we have you here, I want to play for the audience, because some may have joined us late. I want to play the trailer to the documentary, but I want you to introduce it to our audience now that we have you here. So go ahead, if you would, please.
Awesome. It's we got a real fun, and I mean fun, it's entertaining, not the topic is fun, but it's entertaining, it's engaging. And it's a bit of a spoof on the Just Say No to Drugs that was about 35, 40 years ago, when drugs were really benign compared to where they are now.
Right.
And so it's a takeoff on that.
Yeah, that was the one that said, this is your brain, and this is your brain on drugs, and that demonstration. And so let's go ahead and let's play that trailer again, if you would.
Just give me 1 second, Bill.
Okay, standing by.
This is fentanyl. This is your brain on fentanyl. This is your friend's brain who was doing fentanyl with you. This is the guy down the street also doing fentanyl. These are your kids who thought they were taking a Percocet they got from a friend who got it off the internet, but the pill was laced with fentanyl. Now they're unconscious and unresponsive. This is the Mexican cartels. This is the Mexican cartels working with Chinese chemical companies to make pills by the millions, destabilizing the border to traffic enough fentanyl to kill the entire population of a country many times over. This is the ports of British Columbia, where chemicals to make fentanyl are smuggled in by the tonnage, and Canadian super labs are producing fentanyl to export to countries around the world. These are gangs and drug dealers near you, haphazardly mixing fentanyl powder with other chemicals like xylazine, which is a horse tranquilizer, causing the user's skin to fall off. But hey, at least the high lasts longer. Any questions?
I have a question. What is a super lab?
I want to know, why are we seeing these record overdose deaths just in America?
Why is this happening here? Our local hospital rooms are blowing up. Why?
Because they're killing our children. And how do we change that?
Common sense, broad daylight.
How much of this deadly poison is coming across the border?
How come all these people are all passed out?
Where is all of this stuff coming from?
Is China purposely addicting our nation?
How can parents protect their children from fentanyl? That's a tough question.
That is a tough question. And the reality is that our young people, as Dr. Marbut had pointed out, 18 to 45-year-olds, this is the strength of this next generation, the future leaders, the future of our country, a generation of young people that are being annihilated through fentanyl. Dr. Marbut, as you were saying, the takeoff of the commercial, well done, of the trailer, I should say, not the commercial, is that of what happened, what we were doing, during saying no on drugs. And if I remember back at that time, there were a lot of public service announcements about drugs, but you're not seeing a lot of public service announcements for fentanyl. What have we lost in translation here?
We do a little dive, a micro dive, just about San Francisco in our documentary. And one of our things we do is if you're in San Francisco and you do cigarette smoking in a public building or right outside a public building, I think the first ticket's like $285. And I was out there as part of the filming and doing some research, and owner, it was either a store owner or a patron, it called police to report a guy smoking outside the building, and the police respond. Yet we're 2 blocks away from an open consumption site for fentanyl. And so here you are in San Francisco, and we did some digging around, and you can get up to, if you're a repeat offender, your final ticket can be $8,000 for smoking illegally in public a cigarette. But in fentanyl, the city of San Francisco and the county health department at that time was actually paying for a site for you to go use fentanyl. They call it a safe consumption site. And as I've said before, you can't make fentanyl safe. You can't make the drug supply safe with fentanyl.
So here they send people to go die, basically, and with no culpability.
With taxpayer subsidy, but then we're going to give you a ticket for smoking a cigarette outside a building. And I'm not promoting illegal use of cigarette smoking outside a building. I'm not promoting that. But why is it we treat cigarette smoking one way and fentanyl, which is really deadly, and the government is saying, we're going to subsidize you to do fentanyl? Right. It makes no sense.
Yeah, I mean, we're already losing 80 to 100,000 people a year. I don't think people who smoke are hitting those kind of numbers, but this is, it just doesn't make sense. But unfortunately, this is a country we live in right now where everything is inverted. Up is down, down is up. And I don't know, what is it going to take? But again, I'm surprised looking at this situation. Why, when we look at years ago, when there was, public service announcements, radio stations across the country constantly would be running commercials. I mean, this program, I know that Salem Communications has helped you in producing this documentary. I think they have like about 100 stations still. And I think even with the relationships with other broadcasters, that we should be able to bring everybody together and put these commercials out, put these public service announcements out to make people aware, Dr. Marbut, because I think that still, here you are, you're talking to an elected official not that long ago when we already knew, or people that should be aware, especially when you're on a committee and you should know about how dangerous this is. And they're just so largely ignorant. And I mean, that's kind of, it's not even sad. I mean, it's irresponsible.
Well, that's why here's the way I think we need to think about it in context. Think about this. I don't even know if it's a factoid, or just a concept.
Mm-hmm.
More people have died, American servicemen and women, all 7 branches of uniformed service, plus the intelligence agencies,
Mm-hmm.
in 100 years of Americans being at war. So World War II, Vietnam, Korea, Kosovo, Gulf War I, Gulf War II, Afghanistan, Iraq, global war on terror, a few other UN things. Add all that up. More people have died in fentanyl since I talked to that senator that died of fentanyl than all the wars for 100 years that United States has been involved in. And we're not acting like we're at war. And think about China. I spent 3 weeks over in China with filming on the movie and researching.
Mm-hmm.
And I think initially it was all about the money. They wanted to make some quick hardback currency, greenback, and I think that was it. But real quickly they realized we can destabilize our number one adversary, not fire a shot, and Americans actually send them money. I mean, it's really, if you could have a war footing and kill your opposition's population 18 to 45 in the most successful way over any other cause of death, what a great way to destabilize your adversary and not spend any money and actually make some money. It is, they have really figured it out, and we're not acting like that with China. Now, I will say President Trump gets this issue, unlike any other president, who before, because this still was going around during the Obama administration in the beginning, the very, infancy.
Right.
And everybody I talked to back then, they're like, oh, it's just another drug. It's another thing. And then when Biden's group came in, it was very slow to react. They tried to react in the last 3 or 4 months going to the election, but maybe I'm too cynical, but were they reacting because it's the right thing to do? Or were they reacting to salvage the campaign that was in a ditch at that point? Are they really trying to do the right thing? And I just think they were just late to any crisis, but this crisis in particular.
Yeah, I think we give them sometimes. I think we give politicians too much credit, and that does sound cynical, but and that's based on years of experience and observing what they do. Is that they're more interested in getting reelected than really good policy, and there's very few politicians, sadly, that are around that are willing to, put it all on the line and fall on their sword for the American people. And we keep electing them into office thinking that they have a mindset like that. But the fruit of their efforts tells you differently. It tells you, these things that, as you say, and I'm with you on it, it makes us all cynical because this goes on for, such a long time. And then you look at, okay, so here, first of all, you've got an adversary that says, hey, I want to be where you are. I want to be the predominant ruling nation on the planet. And we are, and they've made it clear, they want to overtake America. And they've been very systematic about it. They have they have bought our politicians. We know that money comes into the country, and we know through the Confucius Institute, they have invaded our universities. They're controlling education. We know through the supply chains, America, through our trade policies, have allowed them to get an upper hand to take over and even steal intellectual property from the people who have engineered it and created it and did all the R&D, and on at every turn. China has proven itself to not be an ally. They clearly, as you say, are an adversary. And so here they get away with fentanyl. They bring this in. And so does fentanyl beget COVID? And it demonstrates not only to the communist Chinese that want to overtake America, but to the world that America is a bunch of knuckleheads and we're vulnerable to this because, because of greed or whatever it is that you want to put it on. But, you look at all the money that China has put in to, I guess, as Miranda Devine put it, to elite capture our elected officials.
And then go back 10 years. You're exactly right on all that about China. So take up everything you just said and then add to the mix the supply chain that was already developed by the Mexican cartels into the country.
Yes.
And that's what China didn't have. And so they have this very unholy alliance between the China and everything you just said, add in the Mexican cartels,
exactly,
and get it in. And now, in the last couple of years, you're starting to see the Canadian biker gangs come in and are they're now backfilling because the southwest border in the last 3 months has really started to get closed down. I mean, President Trump is serious about closing the border, and now you got sort of a move to the Canada. And I always want to remind people why Canada is so important. Just like the southwest border is right there, the northern border, a lot of people are not aware that the U.S.-Canadian border is the longest land border between any two countries in the world.
Exactly.
And so we got to get serious on the northern border, just like we've gotten serious on the southwest border, and we got to get serious with China. And then you had one thing there that I think we should always, and those are part of the solutions. We got to get tough on Canada, Mexico, and China. But the other thing is we have to at some point have an honest question or an honest sort of dialogue inside the United States. Why is it we're 4.25% of the world's population? We're consuming 36% of the fentanyl world supply, and we're 66% of the worldwide death total reported. Now, not all countries report their deaths, so I understand that 66% is probably closer to 40 or 50, but
right.
You get the point. Why are we 10 times the death rate of the rest of the world? Why are we consuming so much illicit drugs compared to, when you go to China, there's not a fentanyl problem in China. And ironically, when you go to Mexico City, you almost can't find fentanyl or anybody using fentanyl. So they know how dangerous it is, but they let us do it.
Well, and probably the way they enforce it too, Dr. Marbut, is that if you are selling it or participating in it, you don't pass go collect $200. You go straight to jail. And in some cases, there's a death sentence there. Here in America, go ahead.
In China, they execute dealers. And what I was told when I was on the ground, if you get caught, especially the high volume or high quantity or the high potency drugs, if you get caught, if you're alive in 2 weeks, that's very unusual. You probably have some other benefit to the Chinese Communist Party. You got something else that you're going to help them with in trade. If not, they execute you. And the trial's less than a day. And I'm not promoting non-fair trials. I'm not promoting that. But the point is, they, within their system, take drug distribution very serious. And you look at the states of California, Washington, Oregon, they had all passed legalization, decriminalization of drugs through up and down. And then you got places like Chicago, Atlanta, New York at time, not now, where they weren't prosecuting it. So whether it's because you decriminalize it formally or you just don't prosecute it, really doesn't matter. If you're not prosecuting a high volume potency drug dealer, drug distributor, we're going to go backwards on this issue. If we lean into it, we're going to go forward. And I will say there was one thing that was sort of missed in the last election that I'm starting to get hopeful on. California is a blue state. We all know that. A lot of people are missed last election, November election, they voted 2-1 to overturn the California legislature to start to recriminalize drugs. And a lot of people missed it because it was all, we had the presidential election, everything else going on, the Senate and the House. But even California blue voters are saying, this is nuts. We've lost our brain. We've lost our way. We've gone woke, and we're more worried about pronouns than saving people's lives.
Exactly. And then hopefully they don't run into activist judges that are so compassionate that say, well, the voters really didn't mean to vote that way. They have done this in the past. I know that because I was born and raised there were 8 million people that voted for the definition of marriage. And it took one gay judge in San Francisco to erase 8 million votes. Welcome to the blue state, insane state of California, which I still have kids in, which is very disconcerting, as you can imagine. But anyway, I'm wondering, Dr. Marbut, we only have about 3 minutes left here, but is there some sort of, with all the intelligence that we have offering, the fact of the matter is that we've got an addicted, consuming base here in this country that's a magnet to all these illicit drugs. And as dangerous as fentanyl is there some sort of methadone-like drug that can help these people so that it helps them, either get off the drug or, to help ameliorate the danger of fentanyl?
Sadly, the short answer is there's some that have some nominal benefit or have been proven that can work a little bit. But here's the problem. Fentanyl kills you so fast. Remember that, 13, 18-month window, you just don't find people that far. And so if you wait for treatment and you're taking such a powerful drug, you're dead before your treatment starts. And so the only good way to deal with fentanyl is not to get started in the first place. I know that sounds a lot Nancy Reagan-ish, but it really is. We've never seen a drug this powerful, and the best way to not get hooked on fentanyl is not start, and also to realize, back to what the DEA is finding, that 2/3 of all illicit drugs on the street have fentanyl at some level in it. And so we really have to fight this by not saying there's a safe way to do it, we can get you off of it, or we can make fentanyl safe. You have to say, no, and keep repeating how lethal this drug is. And that's where we solve this.
Well, it's a very comprehensive approach. That's only one part, I think, in terms of it. But like you said, we've got to disrupt the supply chain. The cartels are very deep into our country. They're involved in every state of the union. Before, I remember when we first started noticing it, it was maybe a dozen states. Now it's pretty well been identified that the cartels are in every state of the union. And so they have their operations for drugs and sex trafficking and every evil thing that you can imagine that would generate income. And the fact of the matter is that, it really brings into question the morality and soul of the American people. Are we that corrupt that we cannot see the danger and what we're doing, to our fellow citizens and what we're doing to our families by participating in all these things that are illicit, that are empowering? And the cartels are saying, thank you very much, because we basically have created a big booming business for them.
You're exactly right. And your point about we got to work on supply and demand at the same time, it's critical.
Right.
We got to go after all the borders and China, but we also have to start working inside of the country too.
Right. Well, Dr. Marbut, again, I want to thank you so much for being with us. And again, knowledge is power, and we've got to continue to do everything we can to, get the word out there. So Dr. Robert Marbut is a senior fellow at the Discovery Institute. He served under 3 presidential administrations, most recently as the executive director of the U.S. Interagency Council on Homelessness from 2019 to 2021 under the Trump administration. Thank you again for your time and for coming on the show, Dr. Marbut. Take care.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
And thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for sharing a part of your day. And hopefully this information we've shared with you has been empowering, not only for yourself individually or for others that you may have some influence under, because it is amazing, you know, the amount of people who are dying. This is the lethality of this drug is something that we cannot underestimate. As Dr. Marbut had illustrated, I mean, the amount of people who have died from fentanyl exceeds the number of casualties in each of the wars through the 1900s and the current era. I mean, think about that. And again, the numbers continue to grow. So thank you again for being with us. May God bless you. May he keep you. May his peace be upon you. And may he be gracious unto you. Thank you so much for being with us. God bless.